Hi, I'm Jen Best from Beaker Button and I'm going to show you how to make a Christmas tree today. So the first thing I'm going to do is thread my needle with 4-ply thread, and I'm using 4-ply sock yarn because this is my favourite thing to use. It's what I use mostly, and I'm moving it so that my needle is nearly halfway down. This is so you've got a slightly longer and slightly shorter edge, and this is a sparkly yarn, so there's a little bit of glitter in it, a tiny little bit of Selena. I'm going to tie one end, the longer end, around the ring with a single knot, and I'm going to leave my tail at 2 centimeters, and I'm going to point it in the direction, you see here it's pointing in the direction that I'm going to stitch, and pull that quite tight. So I'm going to do a blanket stitch around the outside of my ring, and if you've seen some of my other videos you'll know that I do this in the opposite way to the way that I do it on fabric. So I bring my needle up from the back and stop, and then I pass it from right to left underneath, and then I pull through, and as I pull through, that loop that makes the stitch just pulls tight over the tail, and it just leaves a little knot here, and then you can just tighten that again if it's this tail, if it's got a little bit loose and lumpy here. So we'll do that again, up from the back, underneath from right to left, and pull through, and as I pull through you'll notice I turn my hand in, and the loop that's the stitch goes over the tail, and that little action of turning your hand in, that puts the loop in the right place. Just like that. See, it just sort of catches it automatically. So I'm pulling quite tight as I'm going, keeping my tail at the top because it's easier to lasso it. And there, it hasn't quite caught, so I could just use the needle to flick it through. And as I'm going round, you'll get this little ridge that forms around the outside. Make it nice and tight. And as you're working your way round, you also want to be pushing the stitches up together a little bit, because when we do our spokes in a minute, we're going to be laying them across at an angle, which means that you'll pull the stitches apart if there's any space, if there's any gaps. So just making that up through, underneath, all the way around. Every now and then you'll drop the ring and hold the needle up. It's very difficult to show this on the camera. I'm going to drop the ring and hold the needle. You see that just spins all that extra thread, all that extra spin out. You twist when you stitch, and then you can move the needle a little bit as well. And once you've gone over the tail, things are much easier, much quicker. So very firm, pushing it up together. You get this little ridge forming around the outside. So as you're covering your ring, you'll see if the thread starts to twist, and you can just let that ring spin round. All the twists will come out the thread. And it just stops you getting knots in your thread so much. Got to have some tinkly music over the top. You can see nice and tight, nice and dense. It's something that gets better with practice. So if this is your first button, it'll take you a little while to figure out how tight you actually want to make those stitches. You'll get more practice as you get, you'll get tighter as you get more practice rather. So when I'm doing these, I make these quite quickly. You guys can take your time. You can stop the video and catch up when you're ready. I'm going to keep going all the way around. That was me hitting the camera, so sorry if it wobbled. I've got this new camera configuration. Every time I do one of these videos, I end up doing a different camera configuration. I think this one's hopefully it's gonna work. I shall see when I edit it whether it's done its job. So if you do your blanket stitch in a different way, that's absolutely fine. Everybody is different. As long as it's working for you and you're getting that little ridge around the outside, it comes all the way around here. Nice and tight there, can't move it very much. It's not a you must do it like this kind of thing. It's more about what's comfortable for you and what works for you. I've always done it this way, so my muscle memory is built up this way. It's about being consistent, getting rhythmic with it. And you see I'm starting to get a bit tangly here, so I'm gonna just let that unspin. Nearly done. So as I'm moving it as I'm going, it means that I won't end up with a great big gap, and I've got a nice consistent stitch all the way around, nice and tight. Get those last few, and when the yarn gets a little bit shorter, it's easier to pull it tight. So if I've done my job correctly, I've given you a materials list at the start, but this is 2 meters to go around the outside. That's a very average, because your stitch tension will be different, or might be different from mine. So if you're finding you're getting a little bit short, then just have more thread. If in doubt, if you're finding you're ending up with a lot spare, then have less thread. So here you can see I can just get one more stitch in there. There we go. And that's nice and tight all together. So if I put that on my hand, it's probably easier to see. So you've got this nice ridge around the outside. That's casting. So what we're going to do now is called slicking. We're going to turn that ridge onto the inside. So I'm just twisting that round. You see it's all sitting nicely in the middle then. I'm just using my thumb and forefinger just to turn it round, and then I'll just give that a little bit of a tug so they sit neatly inside there. Okay, I'm just going to move my needle down a little bit, so I've got quite a lot of slack left over. So that's my ring all slicked. If I move that thread out of the way, you see it's a nice neat ridge on the inside and we've got a smooth outside. So now we're going to lay the spokes, and this is a little bit different from if you've made a cross wheel or something that's like a wheel shape. We're actually going to lay them across at an angle, and I'm going to do them in like this. So I'm holding on to the edge of the ring with my thumb and forefinger, and I'm actually using my nail there to pinch so I can see the whole circle. I'm bringing the yarn down from the back. I'm not holding my needle. Down from the back, underneath at 6 o'clock. And then I'm going all the way across to 10 o'clock, and I'm going to kind of wedge it in there. And I'm coming back down at 6 o'clock. And then I'm going over at 11. And I'm coming back down at 6 o'clock again. Going over at 12. So you've got 3 lines in there now. Back down at 6. I'm going just to the left of my other wraps because that will kind of catch it down there a bit more. It'll hold it in place a bit more. Over at 1 o'clock, and then back down and over at 2. And actually I'm going to lay that one very slightly across there. So once you've got your 2 o'clock wedged in, and it should sit quite nicely, you're going to pinch the 2 o'clock point with your thumb and forefinger on your non-stitching hand. And you're going to bring the needle up. So my thread is on the right hand side. You're going to bring the needle up between the ring and the far left spoke. But you're going to leave it loose on the back, so you've got this little loop here on the back. Okay, then you're going to drop the needle down over all the spokes between the ring and the far right spoke, but on the inside of that little loop that you've just left. Okay, so I'm going down on the inside of that one, and then you're going to pull tight and right up into the sort of top of the ring. I'm just using my nail there to push that right up. Once you've got that, that'll sort of do a knot round. Then you're going to bring the needle up and down just to kind of fix it in place. Okay, now turn it onto the back, and you're going to pass your needle through those 2 loops, the knot and the loop, and from the bottom of the fan to the top. So I just about got enough thread there, and that will tighten that in place. And then I'm going to leave this bit of thread for later. I'm going to actually do a little loop with that bit of thread later. So this is nice and secure now. Then we're going to change colour. And we're actually going to stitch that way, but our Christmas tree is that way. You start to see the Christmas tree shape now. So we're going to thread the needle with the green. Again, nearly halfway down, so you're not pulling so much thread through. I've got a little gap there. Going back the opposite way, I'm going down through the knot towards the base of the Christmas tree, and I'm keeping this one tight while I'm doing it. You pull that through, just undo those little twists, and you're going to leave yourself about 10 centimeters of tail, just like that. So I'm holding on to this one, then I'm going to turn it over to the front, and then we're going to start stitching. So that will join it in, and then at the end this green tail will get woven in at the back. So now we're going to do our back stitch over all the spokes. So you're going to come up to the left of the far right spoke. So I'm going to bring that through and pull it down, tug it down into place at the base there, and then I'm going to stitch over one spoke. So you're going down the side of that spoke. So I've got one stitch on this spoke here. Then I'm coming up to the left of the next spoke on the left. So if you look at the back, that will be under 2 spokes. Then you're going down over 1 spoke, and then you've got a stitch on the next one. So we'll do that again, up to the left of the next spoke on the left, and then down over 1 spoke to the right. Left of the next spoke on the left, down over that spoke to the right. And then the last one, same again, up to the left of the far left spoke and down over that spoke to the right. So then what you have is a line of stitches all the way across, and you can use your needle or your thumb and forefinger just to push them all right down in, just like that. So they sit really nicely just at the bottom there. So that's row 1. Now we've got to start row 2, and we're going to wrap this far left spoke again. So we're going to come up to the left of the spoke on the left and go down over that spoke. That starts round 2. You've now got 2 stitches on this one. Then we're going to change direction for our back stitch. So we're coming up to the right of the spoke on the right and going left over that spoke. We do that again, up to the right of the spoke on the right, and we're going left over that spoke again. And you do that all the way across. So you're back stitching, but you're going in the other direction, and then you do that last one up to the right of the far right spoke and over 1, and then you can use the needle just to push those down into place. If you're a weaver, it's like beating. We're going to wrap this far right spoke again, so you're coming up to the right of that spoke, and then you're going down over to the left. So we've got 3 on here now on this far right spoke. Then we're going to change direction for the back stitch, so you're coming up to the left of the next spoke on the left and going down to the right of that spoke 1 stitch, and you'll keep doing that until you filled it in. So each time I'm coming up to the left of the next spoke over, so I'm coming under 2 at the back and I'm going down over 1 at the front, and I can use my nail or the side of my needle to beat my stitches into position. Then I'm wrapping my outside spoke again, and then I'm coming up to the right of the next spoke over, chopping my needle, and you're going to keep working back and across and back and forward rather, covering those spokes in back stitch, and each time you do it you're going to push down. Up and down. And then you're going to wrap that outside spoke again, because that makes a stitch to start your next round. And then you'll come back across. You'll notice I'm making the stitch in 2 parts. So I'm coming up to the front and then I'm stitching down to the back. And each time I'm coming to the front, I grab my thread between my spare fingers, and each time I'm coming to the back I'm doing the same thing, and that helps to keep the stitches tight on the spokes. It stops them getting loose and floppy. Everyone's tension's different. And keep working my way back and forward. Every now and then I'm pushing those stitches down, so you can see that really takes quite a lot of stitches down into the down into the top of the tree effectively. But what you're doing is you're sort of adding more stitches than you need onto the spokes, so that when we get down to the bottom where you've got that curve, you will never get the stitches around those spokes neatly just by stitching, but you can push them down if you've got more stitches than you need in here. I always think of it as overloading the stitches. So I'm just working my way back and forward. And I'm starting my next round again, and then I'm coming up and working across in the opposite direction. And you can sit and work alongside me, or you can stop the video and catch up. And remember to untwist every now and then. So if you're starting to get knots and little twisty bits in your thread, just hold the needle up, drop the ring and let the twist spin out. Feels a bit mean pushing all the stitches down because you think, oh, I'm nearly at the edge, and then you push them all down and you really aren't. And I'm teaching a class in this. Always feels a bit mean. Just sitting in front of the telly is always a good thing to do this. Let's do that one again. You see my spokes are starting to get a little green just where the thread is running across them. This particular green I keep for me because I put a lot of green dye in it and it's always leaks. But it's such a deep, rich green. It's beautiful for that, for doing Christmas trees and things. And that little bit of sparkle, I love that little bit of sparkle. Nearly done. So you can obviously use other threads. If you're doing them, you can make these round bangles and use some chunky wool. And that works really nicely. They work up quite quickly and they're about the same size as baubles on the Christmas tree then. And or you can hang them. It works really well. I'm doing a class at the Whitchurch Silk Mill next year on I think it's on the 14th of June, and we're making seasonal trees and we're doing those around bangles and then hanging them as four sort of trees. It's one of the patterns in my Dorset Inspirations book. I'm going to do it at the silk mill where it's beautiful and the river's flowing and the weather should hopefully be nice. We could take it outside if we wanted. It would be really good. There are still places, if anyone's thinking, oh, that sounds nice, You can book it through the website, and you'll get to make 1 tree in a day, and then you'll take the pattern home for the other 3. You can make the other 3 at home. And you see I'm not that far off now. I'm starting to squash my stitches into that edge bit there. Just push it down a little bit more. So again, with this green thread, you're going to use 2 meters, but feel free to add or take away as you're using it. You might find that your tension's much looser than mine and you use more thread, or you might find it's tighter and you use less. It's all different. Everyone's different. So I'm probably not going to get much more in there. Starting to find it tricky to put the needle over the top of the stitches at the bottom. So I've got my stitches nearly to the bottom here, but I've got a lot of spare in there. So then I can just use my thumb and forefinger to push down, and that fills out that bottom really nicely. And that works really well. So there's my Christmas tree. That's the front, and there's a nice smooth back. If you want to, you can obviously use the back as the front. I'm going to use this because I like the lines down it. So choose which one your back is. I'm going to use this as my back, so the smooth bit is my back, and I'm going to weave through the back of the stitches and then back down in the opposite direction, and I'm just skimming the back of these stitches. I'm not trying to go too deeply through the thread, because what I don't want is for that to show on the front. So when your needle's in, if you turn it over, if you can see the needle, then you'll see the thread. And pull that down there, and then I'm going to cut that off. Get quite in close there. And I'm going to take my other green thread and weave that in as well. So I'm just going to go down through the back in one direction, just skimming that thread on the back there, and then back up through. This one I'm not so worried about because this is a sort of wrap around, so you won't see the needle. So 2 passes, and then you can trim that one off as well. You could, if you want to, use the tail just to stitch over that bit, but I'm going to leave that because I like that little white bit. I think that looks like a nice little touch of snow or a star or something on the back there. And then we're going to put some decoration on. So you're going to pass that through the back, making sure you can't see the needle on the front. Pull that right up into there. And then go back down, and I'm going to put a line of tinsel. Gives you tinsel instead of baubles to start with. So I'm coming out where I want my first line of tinsel on the other side. So if I show you both on this tree, and then you can have a go. So I'm actually going to move over through those stitches, and that will help kind of keep it in place then. Just like that, onto this side. So I'm going to come around the outside and over one spoke, and then down through the stitches. And I'm going to come up that side, keeping the line in place, and go down, splitting that first stitch that I did. So what it looks like is just a little over the top. Then I'm going to come up to the next spoke and go down just inside, splitting the thread from the pink stitches so they all join up. So it kind of looks like that. And then split the thread. So you're keeping them all as a continuous line, but it looks just like a little line of tinsel, like so. You can also do your tinsel over 2 spokes. So I'm going to come up through the back of the work so I can then go over my next line, and I'm going to, instead of stitching over 1 spoke, move that down a little bit, I'm going to stitch over 2 spokes effectively. You see a longer stitch, and then I'm going to come up in between, so it's a split stitch in between the threads of my pink, and I'm going to stitch down over 2 spokes. Then I'm coming up under 1, splitting my thread, and down over 2. It just gives you a slightly different effect. It sits on the surface of the tree rather than sitting down inside. Just giving you some different ways of playing with it basically. And then down the outside. So that gives you a nice sort of a tinsely effect across. And then if you want to do baubles, you can do beads obviously if you want to. I'm going to show you a French knot. So I'm moving my thread through the back of the button, not pulling too tight because I don't want it to sit. I want it to sit around the outside here. And then I'm going to bring my thread, and we'll do a couple of baubles up here. So I'm going to bring my thread through, and I'm splitting this green thread. I'm trying to add my bauble sort of in between. Instead of going under the threads, you're actually parting them. You see I'm taking a little chunk there. So the thread's coming through, I'm holding it in my fingers. I've got the button in my index finger and thumb, and then my ring finger and my middle finger are holding the thread tight and up and away from the button. The needle's going to come from the back, and then it's going to twist around once and twice. And what I'm looking for is the thread that's attached to the button is at the same end as the eye, and the thread that's still in my hand is at the same end as the tip. And I've got 2 wraps around there. If I loosen that, you can see I'm keeping them tight. And then I'm putting my needle back down, but in a slightly different place. So I've moved over a little bit. I've gone in there, I'm coming out there. Can you see there's a sort of just a slightly different place? I'm keeping this tight, so I'm keeping my thumb on the thread that's wrapped around the needle, and then I'm just gently going to pull through, and that leaves me with a little tiny French knot. So I'm going to do that again. I'm going to bring my needle up where I want my next stitch, and I'm doing it so it's splitting the thread. I'm holding the thread away from the button, and I'm going to put my needle from back to front and then twist it clockwise round. 1, 2. So the line of thread attached to the ring, attached to the button rather, is at the eye end. And then I'm going to tip that up and go down in a slightly different place, keeping it tight. And then I'm going to do one more up here. So I'll do this one a little bit quicker. So come through, 1, 2, down in a slightly different place, holding it tight. And then you've got 3 little baubles up there as well. So you can pick any of those to play with. You can add beads to it. You can put different bits and pieces on it. That's entirely up to you. Once you've done your decoration and you're happy, you're going to weave that tail through the back twice. And then trim that off. And I used about 1 metre, or I cut about 1 metre, but I've got about 50 centimetres spare, so you don't need very much of the decoration thread. And then your thread that you've left over with your white thread that you've left over, you're going to thread that onto your needle, pass it, it'll come out from the back, and if it doesn't, make it come out from the back. pass the needle through the little bundle of threads. I'm actually above the wraps. I'm actually through those little bundles of threads, leaving yourself a little loop. I'm trying to make this tiny little loop here because that's all the thread I've got. You can always use a new bit of thread. And then you're going to slide that down through. And then back up. And that will fasten that off. So before I slide that back up, I'm actually just going to move that out a little bit. There we go. So I've just got a little bit more of a loop. Pass that through there. And then I can trim that off. And then you've got a little hanging loop. It looks like he's got a smiley face. And that's your, there we go. That's your little Christmas tree hanging. So I hope you've enjoyed that. Thank you for watching. Any questions, obviously drop me a line and I'll do my best to answer them. And happy Christmas to you all. Thanks. Bye.